Hi everyone, welcome to this lesson on To Be or Not To Be by Tommy Emmanuel. Before we start the lesson, I'd like to point out that only the first part will be released on YouTube. For full access, you can head over to my Patreon page or my brand new website. If you are looking for the tab and notation file, then do head over to the website and buy it through the music notes link there. That way you'll get 20% off the regular price. All links are down below in the description. To Be or Not To Be was written by Chet Atkins and it appeared on the album he recorded with Tommy Emmanuel. Tommy later arranged it for solo guitar, and it is my new song of choice to put forward when the topic of unexpectedly challenging songs comes up. If you listen to the song, it's hard not to be immediately charmed by the uplifting melody and the positive atmosphere. The song also makes use of a light swing feel that makes everything just breeze by. And then you start taking it apart and you realize there is a lot more going on than you expect. And it's not the tempo nor the picking hand techniques that are complicating things this time. The first challenge will probably be the variety of chord shapes you have to go through. And Tommy is using everything at his disposal here. Open chords, bar chords, thumb over the side of the neck, wide jazzy chord voicings. Your fretting hand playing posture will be tested on all fronts when going through this song. And then there is the fact that this tune makes use of a medium tempo, which gives Tommy all the room he needs to play all sorts of variations. So, in short, there is a lot to go through here. With all the shortcuts, variations and alternatives I need to explain, the full lesson is over an hour and a half long. Now, just to be clear, this isn't Tommy's hardest song either. It's just more demanding than I expected. The intro, verse and chorus are all very doable, and I've tried to lay out the tutorial in such a way that you start with the easiest version and then add more difficult variations to that framework as you go. And then you get to the bridge. The bridge might be one of the trickiest sections I have ever come across in Tommy's music. But just to make sure that everyone gets a chance of completing this song, I'm providing you with loads of alternatives. For one specific section, I'm even offering no less than 4 different ways of playing it, hopefully providing something for everyone. So let's not delay any longer, strap in tight and dive right in. Okay, let's get to playing then. The guitar is in standard tuning. I'm using a thumb pick. I guess it's possible to play the tune without one as well. I went for my trusty old Martin J40 with really clear position markings, since we'll be jumping up and down the neck quite a bit. Now let's dive straight into the intro. As always, I'll play through the thing first and then I'll see you again on the other side for all the explanation. Here we go. And straight into the first verse. Lots of movement around the same chord shape. You start with a B power chord. Index finger, 2nd fret on the A string, ring finger, 4th fret on the D string, pinky, 4th fret on the G string, and you're also going to need an open B string. Those 2 last notes, 4th fret on the G string and that open B string, is the exact same pitch. We're going to alternate between that fretted note and the open string. You start with the thumb pick on the A string and then you play the middle finger in the picking hand on the open B string. Tommy is either muting this intro very lightly or playing it entirely open, at least the bass part. So that first bass note, then you alternate with the index finger to the G string, playing the same note, so open B string, G string, and then the thumb pick to the D string. And back to the open B string, and from that point on, it's always the exact same picking pattern for the remainder of the bar and the next bar. So you have 1, 2, 3. On the third beat, you land with the thumb pick on the A string again. And then it's the same thing, A string, G string, D string, and back to the open B string. So that first full bar sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Back to the first beat. Now, if I'm playing it this slowly throughout the lesson, chances are high that I'm going to drop the swing feel when showing you the fingerings. It is necessary to add it back in once you start playing it a little bit more up to speed. So instead of having this straight sound, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you're going for this, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That is the time feel you're going for throughout the entire song. And in the second bar, you do the same thing, A string, G string, D string, B string, A string, G string, D string, G string again. So the very last time when you're ending that 2-bar segment, you're not picking the open B string, but you're heading back to the G string. So only beats 3 and 4, 3 and 4, and back to the G string. And this allows you to pick the middle finger on the open string again when you play the next bar. So that's the only reason why we're playing that last B note on the G string, is so we can transfer to the open B string once we head into bar number 3. If I connect really quickly those last 2 beats to the next bar, you get this. 1, 2, 3. So, and picking 2 times that open B string probably would have been a little bit too awkward. So Tommy goes for A string, G string, D string, G string, and then B string and A string again. That is the picking mechanic. We're going to do the exact same thing at the end of bar 4. So those first 2 bars sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, to the G string, and then the next 2 bars is the same thing, apart from a little fill all the way at the end. So you start with the exact same thing. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way at the end again, ending up on the 4th fret on the G string. That hammer-on is open E string to the 2nd fret, and this is played in a triplet feel as well. So you play that first beat, 1, 2, that is the timing. So 1, 2, 3 with the open B string, and then to the thumb pick on the D string, index finger to the G string, and then we move to a G dominant chord. 3rd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret. More on that in just a second. Those last 2 bars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Your pinky sticks to the same fret, so it just stays on the 4th fret, and you move up the index finger after that hammer-on to the 3rd fret on the low E string, and you swap out the ring finger on the D string for the middle finger on the 4th fret. That way you get 3rd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret, and then an open B string, and in a second you're also going to need an open E string on top. If you count up all those different notes, you get something of a G13 dominant chord. Picking pattern, still exactly the same thing. So you start again, bass note, this time on the low E string, together with that open B string, G string, D string, B string, low E string, G string, D string, and then to an open E string on top. That open E string is the 13 of that dominant chord, and then we just continue with the same picking pattern, and we end up all the way at the end on an open B string this time, not that 4th fret on the G string anymore. That open B string is going to give us the time we need to move into the next chord. First, that section on the G dominant chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, to an open B string. So in these 2 bars, the picking pattern is always the same, apart from that one variation to the high E string. So bass note, melody note together, Same picking pattern, open E string, back to the B string, back to the B string. You have that open B string sustained as you move to the last chord of the intro, which is an F sharp chord with a few open strings in there. Second fret, low E string with the index finger, then fourth fret on the A string and D string with the ring finger and the pinky, and then middle finger, third fret on the G string, together with an open B string and an open E string. So this is an F sharp dominant chord with an added 4 in there. This is the point in the intro where Tommy tightens up the muting. So he's going to drop down the picking hand for a much more percussive bass part than in the previous parts of the song. The timing of the arpeggiated notes is also going to shift. Up until now, you mostly played them in between the beats. Now, most of the melody notes are going to land on the bass note. So you have that one open B string sustaining from the previous bar. You move to the F sharp dominant chord. You start with a bass note and then D string and G string together. D string with the thumb pick, G string with the index finger. As you move the thumb pick to the A string, you pick the open E string on top. 2, 3, 4. And as you move back to the D string, you pick the open B string. Back to the low E string and the G string together. Back to the D string and the high E string, and then you play the open B string in between that bass note and the next one. To the A string, and now we're going to alternate again A string, G string, D string, B string, in between the bass notes again. That third bar on the F sharp chord is all stuff you already played. So again, you have the B note sustaining from the previous bar, bass note, D string and G string, A string and high E string, another open B string, and the bass note. In time sounds like this. And all the way at the end, the fourth bar is just a strum, just a big wide strum across all 6 strings. And that concludes the intro. So maybe one more time that section on the F sharp chord. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Just leave that open for the entire bar, and then we move into the first verse. That whole intro one more time, really slowly, moving from the B power chord to G dominant to F sharp. Here we go. Full bar, and then we move straight into the first verse. Let's hear what that sounds like. Straight into the second verse. The main challenge here is fretting hand stamina. The picking patterns aren't that complicated, but you are asking a lot of the fretting hand. But you'll see there are a few shortcuts. I now played it exactly the same way Tommy does, but there are a few shortcuts. Especially starting right from the first chord. Tommy starts with a B chord. Pinky, ring finger and middle finger all on the 4th fret, B string, G string and D string. string, and then a small bar down below on the 2nd fret on the E string and A string. So that is the full chord, but you also need an open E string on top. Otherwise, you could just drop down the whole bar in one go. Tommy, most of the time in the opening bar, plays this: A string by itself, then D string and G string, then moves to the low E string with the thumb pick and plays the high E string open at the same time, and then he moves around to this, so he's switching over the ring finger to the D string and dropping down the middle finger on the 3rd fret on the G string, giving you a B major 7th chord. Now this is one of the first spots where we can take a shortcut, but I'll show you the full bar like Tommy plays first. So A string, D string and B string, both E strings switching over, and then playing a small double stop, B string and G string, before you head to the bass note on the D string again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That is what happens. Maybe a bit slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, Tommy almost never plays that 4th fret on the G string before he moves to the B major 7th chord. This is, for me as well, a tricky chord voicing. I quite often get some buzzing strings in there. So it is a lot easier just to grab that B major 7th chord straight away and play this. It's much easier to play. It sounds exactly the same. There is in the whole tune only one bar on the B chord where you actually need that 4th fret. So if you want to go full Tommy Emmanuel, then you do need to do that switch to this. So starting from the B major chord and then moving over to the B major 7th chord, or you can just start on the B major 7th chord and you don't have to move a finger that way. And it sounds exactly the same, and it's a lot easier to play, and especially it's a lot easier to grab that 1st chord. You have a little bit of time the first time around. In about 4 bars, you'll see that you'll have to grab that 1st chord pretty quickly. So this can be a lot easier in that case. You'll also notice that throughout the explanation, I'm muting the bass part most of the time. In the first verse, Tommy plays it pretty much open. So he will play not this, but he will play this with a lot more open strings in there. So see what works for you. Lightly muting can be a way forward as well. Then we move up to the 7th fret. Ring finger 7th fret on the low E string, pinky 7th fret on the D string, middle finger 6th fret on the G string, and index finger 4th fret on the B string. And if that isn't enough, you also need an open E string on top. So make sure that index finger is nice and upright on the guitar, so you get an open E string here. Once you grab that full chord, it's all arpeggiating. You don't have to move any fingers here. Low E string, high E string, to the B string, thumb pick to the D string, and then index finger plucks the G string. 1, 2, 3, back to the low E string. We stick to the same chord shape, only we're releasing the index finger now to an open B string. 1, 2, 3, 4, before ending up on the D string as the last bass note of the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we move into an E6th chord, open E string, ring finger 6th fret on the D string, pinky 6th fret on the G string, index finger 4th fret on the B string, and again, open E string on top. Picking pattern, E string, then D string and B string together, both open E strings at the same time, and then back with the index finger to the B string before playing the bass note on the D string. 1, 2, 3, 4, and right before the next bar you play another open E string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Back to the low E string on the first beat. You remove the ring finger from the 6th fret. You drop down the middle finger on the 5th fret on the D string, giving you E minor 6 now. The picking pattern, almost each and every note is in between the bass notes now. So you have that open E string, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then back to the B chord. As you can see, each and every melody note in between the bass notes. So open E string, low E string bass note, B string, D string bass note to the G string. 1, 2, 3, removing the index finger again, back to the D string and another open B string. That open B string, that very last one, you're going to try and let that ring out as you move back down to the B chord. More on that in just a second. One more time, that E minor chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Back to the B chord. In this section, even if you're playing it open, Tommy is lightly muting the low E string because otherwise it will overpower the melody each and every time. Those two E chords back to back, 3, 4. Back to the B chord. Those first 4 bars all the way through. I'm now muting, as I already told you. It is my intention, if I do the cover video, to play this more or less open. Then you will get this sound. See, all the way at the end, the only thing I'm doing is lightly muting that open E string so it doesn't overpower the rest of the melody. Now you have that open B string. Tommy switches down. He grabs the index finger, middle finger, ring finger as that open B string rings out. This is not easy to do. Then he goes for the same voicing. Exactly the same thing as you played in the first bar. So you have that open B string ringing out from the previous bar. That is that chord shift that I was talking to you about, where it is so difficult to drop down these fingers all at the same time, or more or less at the same time, but all at the same fret. So in this case, going straight for that B major 7th chord is probably going to make things a lot easier for people. Then you get this. Which is just 1,000 times easier, and you're never playing that 4th fret anyway. So again, one more time, the hardcore Tommy Emmanuel change is... That would be Tommy's version, or the easier version going straight for B major 7. And straight to B major. This is just a lot easier on all fronts, but if you want to go hardcore full Tommy Emmanuel, you know what to do. The next chord is the same thing as well. Picking pattern, chord shape, everything is the same thing. And then we move to an A13 chord, open A string, pinky 5th fret on the D string, ring finger 4th fret on the G string, and then index finger a small bar across 2 strings, B string and E string. And on the first beat, you're just going to strum down on this chord, and on the second beat, you add another strum. The first strum is just with the thumb pick across the strings. The second one is with the nails. 1, 2, 3 to the low E string. You arpeggiate basically whatever note you want. I transcribed the 4th fret on the G string and back to the bass note on the D string. 1, 2, 3, 4. A really quick shift. You drop down the bar on the 2nd fret across all 6 strings. You add the ring finger on the 4th fret on the A string and the pinky on the 4th fret on the G string, giving you F sharp dominant sus4. You play that double stop, G string and D string in front of the beat. 1, 2, 3. Halfway that bar, you remove the pinky and you drop down the middle finger on the 3rd fret of the G string, going for a full F sharp dominant chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything else is standard bass pattern over 2 strings and arpeggiating the top E string in between there. So double stop, E string, high E string, D string, G string, E string, high E string, D string. 3, 4. And then we move back into our very first chord and we're heading into more or less a repeat of the verse already. So those last 4 bars, one more time. So in that switch to that F sharp dominant sus4 chord is pretty quick. But that was the first half of the chorus. Let me play those first 8 bars one more time, all the way through. But the good news is you know most of the chord shapes and the picking patterns already. Just a few variations coming up in the second section. Here we go, from bars 1 to 8, the first verse. Straight into the next part of the verse. Now, in the next part of the verse, this is the only time, that very first chord, that B chord, where Tommy plays that 4th fret on the G string. And that is when he does this variation. And he just plays A string, D string in 8th notes, 1, 2, and then plays a double stop on the G string and B string. And this is the only time, the only part where he plays that 4th fret. So that's the only thing to watch out for if you're going straight away in the other parts for that B major 7th chord voicing. So this is what that first bar sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4, and back to the major 7th voicing. So 2 bass notes on the first beat. 1 and 2, the double stop. Move the thumb pick to the low E string. 2nd fret together with the open E string on top again, and then you switch to the major 7th voicing, D string, G string and B string at the same time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and back to the same chord. Same thing. So if you drop that first variation with those 2 bass notes, it's the exact same thing as the first 4 bars of the verse. So one more time, these 4 bars. Another open B string. We're going to shift down to the next chord again, but this time we're moving to a C sharp minor 9th chord. Open B string is ringing out, middle finger, 4th fret on the A string, index finger, 2nd fret on the D string, ring finger, 4th fret on the G string, and in a second we're going to add the pinky to the 4th fret on the B string as well. And you get this. 1, 2, so the first beat is just a bass note. So the second beat is D string, 2nd fret together with the pinky, 4th fret on the B string. 1, 2, 3, alternate with the middle finger to the low E string together with an open E string on top. 1, 2, 3, open E string together with the low E string, and then back to the B string, still 4th fret. 1, 2, 3, on the 4th beat, another bass note on the 4th fret, and then you drop down a full bar again. We're heading back to an F sharp dominant chord, and you're going to play that 2nd fret on the high E string in front of the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You're not using the ring finger on the 4th fret this time. You're just leaving it open. You're going to play a bass pattern on the low E string and the D string. You're not going to include the A string. You have that melody note in front of the beat. 1, 2. As you play the bass note on the D string, you hammer on with the pinky to the 4th fret on the B string. And then On the next bass note, back to the low E string, you add the ring finger to the 3rd fret and you pull off really quickly in one of those embellishments as you play the bass note on the low E string. This is a really cool section, but tricky with those hammer-ons and pull-offs. So you get this. 1, 2, 3. That is the embellishment you're going for. If this is difficult, then start with only the hammer-on and leave out the pull-off, and then you get this. 1, 2, 3. Sounds fine as well. You follow that up with this. 1, 2, 3. Pinky to the 4th fret on the G string, another bass note on the D string, and then you let go of everything apart from the pinky. You play an open B string and you drop down the same B power chord we used in the intro. But on the F sharp chord is pretty tricky. There's a lot going on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and ending up on the B power chord. Even more slowly, that F sharp chord. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And as I play that open B string, that note on the G string, that 4th fret is still ringing out. And we end up on the B power chord. In older versions, now Tommy just plays just the B power chord and does the same thing. Bass note, strum, bass note. He picks up on the open B string and plays 2 more strums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then he moves fingers around to this in order to be able to start with the main melody again in verse 2. In more recent versions, he adds 2 more chords, just putting this out there for those of you that enjoy listening to that particular version, and that is this. So the same thing with the strum in the first bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is again G dominant to F sharp, sus4. Picking pattern, bass note is right in front of the beat. 3rd fret, index finger, low E string. 3rd fret, middle finger on the D string. Pinky is still on the 4th fret, G string. 1, 2, so bass note in front of the beat. D string, G string, and then an open B string. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is just dropping down both the middle finger and the index finger 1 fret, so you now have 2nd fret, 2nd fret, 4th fret, and still the open B string. And again, bass note in front of the beat, 3, 4, and then after that chord you move back to the B major chord for the 2nd verse. So that's just a small variation all the way at the end. Let me put it together one time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and back to the first bass note of the next verse. And that was the full verse. Let me play those last 4 bars one more time, all the way through. Including that one variation. You now know the whole verse. Let me play the last 8 bars one more time. And that was the full first verse. Now let me torture my left hand one more time and try and play through this whole thing, the entire 16 bars, really slowly, and then you're good to go for the second verse. Nothing but variations left to learn in each and every verse that is coming up. Here we go, verse 1, really slowly. into verse 2. Verse 2 isn't going to be a problem once you get through this first part. Nothing but small variations and a few extra little fills in there. The next challenge is going to be the chorus, but that is something for the next part of the tutorial. I'll see you there.